Steve Irwin, the guy who treated deadly animals like old drinking buddies and turned near-death experiences into primetime entertainment. He wasn't just a zookeeper. He was a one-man circus in cargo shorts. Beloved by millions, questioned by experts, and occasionally tackled by reptiles. His legacy is as wild as the creatures he chased. Let's dig into everything wrong with Steve Irwin. Sorry to interrupt, but Steve Irwin's legacy lives on. Yours doesn't, until you hit that subscribe button. Thanks. The Aussie Jungle Kid. Before Steve Irwin became the global poster boy for yelling at animals that definitely didn't consent to being touched, he was just a hyperactive kid chasing lizards in Queensland. Yup, Australia. Born in 1962 to wildlife-loving parents, Steve was wrangling snakes by age 6. Because apparently in the Irwin household, nap time was optional, but wrestling pythons was mandatory. His family ran the Queensland Reptile and Fauna Park, which would eventually evolve into the Australia Zoo. Also known as the world's only tourist attraction, where your host might casually wrestle a crocodile while smiling like he's reading bedtime stories. But Steve didn't just grow up near animals. Oh no, he grew up in a full-contact sport with them. He worked as a crocodile trapper in the 80s. Relocating dangerous reptiles instead of, getting a normal job or wearing colors other than olive green. His big break came in 1996 with the Crocodile Hunter, where he introduced the world to a revolutionary idea. Scream educational facts while poking deadly animals with a stick. Fame followed. Logic? Nah, not so much. Death by Sea Pancake. The man who stared death in the face daily, wrangling crocs, taunting snakes, kissing cobras, was tragically taken out by a stingray. A flat, docile underwater pancake with a tail. Steve Irwin spent a lifetime dancing with nature's deadliest creatures, only to be undone by something usually spotted next to toddlers at petting zoos. In 2006, while filming in shallow waters, a stingray struck him in the chest, piercing his heart. The world was stunned. It wasn't just a tragic loss. It was cosmic irony, the kind that makes you suspicious of fate's sense of humor. Fans mourned. Critics asked if it was the inevitable result of years of poking nature with a metaphorical stick. And nature? Nature just reminded us that it doesn't care how famous you are. Steve was fearless, passionate, and unfortunately, mortal. His death wasn't just shocking. It was the ultimate twist ending no one wanted, but everyone remembered. South Park Stingray Stunt. Nothing says too soon like South Park casually resurrecting Steve Irwin just 7 weeks after he tragically died, with a stingray barb sticking out of his animated chest, no less. Because obviously, South Park thought the mourning period ended at the funeral snacks. In this 2006 episode, Irwin was shown at a Halloween party in hell. Yes, hell. Still skewered like an undercooked shish kebab, much to the horror of, well, everyone who wasn't a South Park writer. His family and fans were understandably outraged, and the show's creators brushed it off with their usual, if you're famous, you're fair game defense. But let's be real. Depicting a beloved conservationist freshly deceased with the same weapon that killed him? That's not edgy. It's full-on necro-comedy. It didn't help that Irwin's death was still raw for millions. And this stunt felt less like satire and more like rubbing stingray salt in an open wound. Satire or not, that was one Halloween no one laughed at. The Great Wiki War. When Steve Irwin died in 2006, the internet did what it does best. Immediately went off the rails. His Wikipedia page, instead of serving as a solemn tribute, became a battlefield of trolls, conspiracy theorists, and one incredibly deranged campaign blaming. Wikipedia co-founder Jimbo Wales. Yep, forget the stingray. Some anonymous keyboard warrior decided Jimbo was the true culprit. The vandalism ranged from tasteless jokes to absurd edits, forcing moderators to go full SWAT mode on Irwin's page. You'd think the online world could give it a moment of silence. But nah, they hit edit faster than a crocodile snaps at raw chicken. It was pure digital chaos, and a strange reminder that even global wildlife icons aren't safe from the internet's special blend of grief and idiocy. Steve battled crocodiles, venomous snakes, and unforgiving wilderness. But even he couldn't fend off 4chan with a grudge and too much Red Bull. Baby Bob? So, who needs child services when you've got crocodiles and good intentions? In 2004, Steve Irwin decided to give his newborn son the ultimate Aussie welcome by holding him like a football while feeding a 13-foot crocodile. While Steve probably thought he was reenacting The Lion King Down Under edition, the rest of the world, including child safety advocates and, hilariously, Germaine Greer, thought he was just one tail snap away from being on Australia's Worst Dads. Steve defended the move by saying he was always in control, because clearly nothing bad has ever happened when someone says that before doing something insane. In the end, no one got eaten, but the media chewed Steve out instead. The backlash was so intense that Steve vowed never to do a live feeding demo with kids again, which, honestly, should have never required a vow in the first place. PETA. Problems, mate? PETA versus Steve Irwin was like a reality TV feud no one asked for, but everyone kinda watched. While Steve was out there hugging lizards and riding stingrays like aquatic skateboards, PETA was busy calling him the Dr. Phil of animal harassment. They accused him of poking, prodding, and generally annoying wildlife like a kid with a stick and no adult supervision. And on what would have been Steve's birthday in 2019, PETA thought, you know what this day needs? A passive-aggressive tweet dragging a dead guy. Classy. They claimed Steve's hands-on antics stressed animals out and didn't promote real conservation. Because heaven forbid, someone use charisma and khakis to get kids interested in saving nature. But to be fair, watching Steve sneak up on a Komodo dragon and yell "crikey" like he lost his keys wasn't exactly subtle science. Antarctica. Ice-cold accusations. Leave it to Steve Irwin to get accused of wildlife crimes in the world's least populated continent. While filming his special Icebreaker in 2004, Steve found himself in hot water. Well, metaphorically, after getting a little too up close and personal with some penguins, seals, and whales. The accusations? Violating Antarctica's super strict wildlife interaction laws. Because apparently even emperor penguins need their personal space, Steve. Eyewitnesses claimed Irwin was creeping way too close, disturbing the natural behavior of the animals. Probably because it's hard to concentrate on mating when some khaki lunatic is narrating your love life. Luckily for him, an Australian government investigation cleared Steve of any wrongdoing. But it didn't stop the public from wondering if Antarctica really needed more Crocodile Hunter energy or less. In true Irwin fashion, he treated the whole frozen continent like his backyard zoo. Only this time, the backyard bit back with subpoenas and frostbite. Family drama down under. The Irwin legacy. A heartwarming tale of love, conservation, and an emotional cage match between granddaughter and grandfather. In 2021, Bindi Irwin publicly accused her paternal granddad, Bob Irwin Sr., of treating her like air at a family BBQ for her entire life. She claimed he was emotionally abusive and hadn't shown interest in her, despite the whole wildlife royalty branding. It's like Succession, but with koalas and khakis. The rift spilled over onto Facebook, because of course it did, where Bindi dropped her emotional truth bomb, shocking fans who thought the Irwins were basically the Partridge Family with pythons. Grandpa Bob, once the co-founder of Australia Zoo, had long since left the zoo due to a mysterious difference in vision, which is rich coming from a family whose entire business model involves play wrestling apex predators. The whole feud turned into a PR snake pit, proving even in the animal kingdom, the most vicious clashes are family reunions gone wrong. Greer's verbal death roll. Trust Germaine Greer to say what half the world was thinking, but with the grace of a slap from a spitting cobra. The academic and author torpedoed Steve Irwin's legacy by calling him a reckless showman who treated animals like props in a crocodile-themed circus. Her most infamous burn? Responding to the Baby Bob incident with, "The crocodile could have made the decision for him." Yikes. That's not just shade. That's a full eclipse. Greer basically accused Irwin of endangering wildlife and children simultaneously, like some sort of Aussie double threat daredevil. Of course, the public either applauded her brutal honesty or gasped like she'd insulted Jesus in khaki. Irwin fans were outraged, while critics quietly nodded like, yeah, maybe don't juggle toddlers and dinosaurs. Greer's remarks sliced through the global adoration like a crocodile through raw chicken. forcing people to ask whether Irwin was a wildlife warrior or just a ratings-chasing adrenaline junkie. Spoiler, it's a little from column A, a little from column Crikey. Australia's most embarrassing export. Globally, Steve Irwin was a beloved wildman, Australia's own zoological superhero, but back home, not everyone was thrilled with being known as the country that birthed the Crikey guy. In fact, some Aussies saw him less as a conservationist and more as a one-man cartoon. Bugs Bunny meets Bear Grylls with a mullet. To many, Steve came off like that loud uncle who brings a snake to your wedding and tries to give a TED talk about venom. While Americans wept with joy over his enthusiasm, Aussies cringed at what they saw as over-the-top antics that made them look like they all lived in zoos and communicated via boomerang. His risky stunts and bug-eyed enthusiasm often overshadowed his actual conservation work. Even local comedians poked fun at him as the national doofus. Sure, he helped protect animals, but some Aussies quietly wished he'd protected their reputation too. For every global fan saying "crikey," there was an Aussie saying, "Mate, tone it down." Bindi and the Orca PR splash. In 2014, Bindi Irwin made the bold career choice to partner with SeaWorld, a place PETA would rather nuke than endorse. While her dad had spent his life promoting wild, free-roaming animals, Bindi jumped into bed with the poster child for whale-shaped depression. Cue the backlash tsunami. Animal rights groups and former fans lined up to slam her for supporting a corporation accused of squeezing marine mammals into glorified bathtubs. People were like, how do you go from Steve Irwin to splashy dolphin shows and corporate photo ops? It felt like Bindi took the legacy of a khaki-clad wildlife warrior and traded it for a theme park punch card. She defended herself with the classic "we both care about animals" line. But that didn't exactly pacify critics who were still mad about Blackfish. Even some Irwin loyalists were like, what would Steve think? Probably something between crikey and why is that orca doing the Macarena? Crikey versus blanket. Nothing says responsible parenting like holding a baby near a crocodile's death roll zone. Unless you're dangling that baby off a hotel balcony like a makeshift piñata. Yep, Steve Irwin's infamous 2004 Baby Bob Crocodile demo was quickly likened to Michael Jackson's blanket over the balcony stunt. Suddenly, animal lovers and children's rights activists were singing from the same hymn sheet, only this one was titled, "What the Hell Were You Thinking?" The comparisons came fast. Both were global icons, both made absurd parenting choices on camera, and both apparently forgot that infants aren't action figures. Of course, Steve defended it by saying he had perfect control, which is what every future viral fail compilation starts with. The backlash forced Australia Zoo to rewrite its playbook from "bring your kid to the croc pit" to "maybe don't." Meanwhile, Blanket Jackson grew up and changed his name, but Baby Bob, he got a reptile show. So, who really won here? Cousteau throws shade. When the son of Jacques freaking Cousteau calls you out for disturbing nature, you know you've really made waves, mostly in the form of frightened sea turtles. Jean-Michel Cousteau, an actual oceanic godfather, publicly criticized Steve Irwin's methods, accusing him of using animals as adrenaline props for television. According to Cousteau, Irwin didn't observe wildlife, he practically RKO'd it. The criticism? That Irwin would jump on animals, yank them by the tail, and turn a tranquil moment into a high-octane nature WWE match. And honestly, fair. Cousteau, who believed in slow, respectful observation, watched Steve leap into swamps like a sugar-high toddler at a petting zoo. To him, it was less National Geographic, more Jackass marsupial edition. Irwin fans shot back with, "but he raised awareness," while Cousteau countered with, "so do documentaries that don't involve wrestling." Ultimately, it was the classic clash, cinematic chaos versus scientific chill. But when a Cousteau disapproves, nature listens, probably while side-eyeing the nearest khaki jumpsuit. Wes went quietly. Steve Irwin's right-hand man, Wes Mannion, was basically the zoo's second-in-command and bestie-in-chief, the khaki brotherhood, the bro-croc bond. And then, poof, he was gone. In 2022, fans noticed Wes had quietly vanished from Australia's zoo, like a crocodile slipping under murky water. No grand announcement, no emotional farewell tour, just a cryptic managerial ghosting. Rumors immediately swirled about a possible fallout with Terri Irwin over how the zoo was being run. Some whispered about power struggles, others hinted at creative differences, because apparently even reptile empires have drama. It was the wildlife version of a messy office breakup. And without Wes, the zoo lost a living link to Steve's chaotic glory days. The Irwin family said little. Wes said even less, which means everyone else said a lot. Whatever happened behind the zoo gates, one thing's clear. When your best mate disappears from the khaki crew without a crikey, it raises more red flags than a cobra in a daycare. Khaki Clown Show. Ah yes, Steve Irwin's TV persona. 1 part conservationist, 2 parts cartoon character. To global audiences, he was a lovable Aussie icon. To many Australians, a living, breathing stereotype with a megaphone. His thickened accent, yes, thickened. His endless, crikey catchphrases and constant near-death enthusiasm felt like they were designed in a Hollywood lab. While Americans were busy buying plush Crocs and asking how to adopt a wombat, Aussies were rolling their eyes like, "Mate, you sound like the love child of Crocodile Dundee and an energy drink." Some accused him of exaggerating his awkwardness to cater to international viewers, playing into the wild Aussie trope like it came with royalties. It's like if David Attenborough suddenly started narrating in Cockney rhymes. Sure, it worked for TV ratings and global fame, but to some of his own people, Steve was less a hero and more an overcooked parody in a khaki costume. Still, gotta respect the hustle. Crikey sells. Snake scarf, anyone? Only Steve Irwin could look at a venomous sea snake, one of the world's most toxic creatures, and think, you know what this needs. To be draped over my neck like a party boa. Conservationists, biologists, and people with working survival instincts collectively cringed as Steve turned caution into a contact sport. Critics slammed him for taking unnecessary, showy risks for the sake of TV drama. It's one thing to educate the public about deadly creatures, it's another to turn your jugular into a live-action science experiment. Irwin defenders said he knew what he was doing. But that's also what every guy says before attempting to backflip off a roof. Wrapping your head in murder noodles doesn't exactly scream professional conservationist. It screams, we're gonna need a medic and a ratings boost. Steve blurred the line between educator and daredevil so hard it practically disappeared, right along with common sense. If Darwin had a watch list, Irwin would have been the season finale. FedEx kill snakes. Imagine almost dying from a deadly snake bite and thinking, you know who can fix this? FedEx. In a 2000 commercial, Steve Irwin leaned into the morbid absurdity of his job, joking that a snake had bitten him because the anti-venom was shipped with the wrong courier. Because nothing says reliable logistics like, crikey, I'm losing feeling in my legs. It was classic Irwin. Self-deprecating, fearless, and completely comfortable making jokes about things that would give most of us a panic attack. The ad played like a tourism warning from a parallel universe. Ship it fast, or you die slower. Even as he mocked occupational death by Fang, Irwin oozed charm. The commercial was a reminder that, yeah, he knew what he was doing was insane. But instead of reflecting deeply, he cashed a check and turned it into more snake-charming chaos. It takes a certain kind of mad genius to weaponize your near-death experiences for commercial airtime. Steve did it in khakis. Love, actually. With Crocs. Some couples celebrate their honeymoon with rose petals, champagne, and awkward snorkeling lessons. Steve and Terri Irwin, they spent theirs trapping crocodiles in the Australian wilderness. Nothing says just married like stuffing a 12-foot salty into a cage while whispering sweet nothings over radio static. Most people bring souvenirs from their honeymoon. Steve brought home a TV pilot and probably some minor puncture wounds. That trip became the first episode of the Crocodile Hunter, proving that even his romantic life came with fangs, adrenaline, and just a dash of blood loss. It wasn't just unorthodox. It was peak Irwin. Instead of candlelit dinners, they had torchlit swamps. Instead of matching bathrobes, they had matching bite-resistant gloves. It's either the most extreme romance story ever or the plot of a very niche horror film. But hey, nothing builds a marriage like mutual trust and the constant threat of amphibious dismemberment. Roses die, but a crocodile honeymoon lives forever in syndication. Late night wildlife fright. Steve Irwin on The Tonight Show was less interview and more live-action prank with fangs. While Jay Leno nervously clutched his desk like it was an emotional support shield, Steve would march in with a giant snake, a baby croc, or some creature that looked like it could legally vote. The audience loved it. Leno, not so much. Steve had a habit of placing animals closer to Jay's face than any man has a right to. At one point, Jay looked like he was aging in real time. Steve, of course, was gleeful, treating the set like it was an impromptu episode of Fear Factor Marsupial Edition. There were screams, there was chaos, there was probably a lawyer nervously watching from backstage. But Irwin didn't care. For him, it was all about making wildlife exciting, even if that meant triggering Leno's fight-or-flight reflex on national TV. Who needs cue cards when you've got venomous reptiles? Crikey overload. If you took a shot every time Steve Irwin said crikey, you'd be legally unconscious before the second commercial break. The man didn't just use the word, he weaponized it. Crikey became Steve's exclamation of choice for everything. Spotting a snake, dodging a bite, tripping over a tree root, probably stubbing his toe. It was his punctuation mark, his emotional compass, and his default setting. At some point, viewers had to wonder if he was paid per crikey, or if it was just a nervous tic developed from hanging out with death machines 24/7. While fans found it endearing, others, especially Australians, found it a little forced, like someone trying too hard to convince the world they wrestled kangaroos in high school. Still, crikey was more than a word. It was a brand. It was Steve's version of, let's get ready to rumble, but for crocodiles. Love it or cringe at it, crikey. Ensured no one ever forgot whose show they were watching. Crocs before cartoons. When most 9-year-olds are busy trading Pokemon cards or learning not to eat glue, Steve Irwin was wrestling crocodiles. Yes, actual crocodiles. Not the plush toy kind, real fanged, death-lurking crocodiles. Under his dad's ever-so-responsible supervision, Steve took his first spin in the croc wrangling ring before hitting double digits. Because nothing says healthy childhood development like hand-to-hand combat with apex predators. Steve proudly told this story for years, and fans cheered while child psychologists quietly screamed into pillows. It's the kind of anecdote that makes you wonder if his bedtime stories involved CPR and tetanus shots. Sure, it gave him his origin story, but it also set the bar for future bad decisions way, way too high. Imagine being his school teacher trying to enforce rules on a kid whose weekend hobby was dodging reptilian death rolls. Steve Irwin wasn't just raised around danger, he was practically breastfed on it. Crikey indeed. Khaki or die trying. Some wear uniforms for safety. Steve Irwin wore one for stubborn brand commitment. His outfit of choice? Khaki. Always khaki. Shorts, shirt, boots. He looked like a safari Barbie that came with a warning label. Whether it was 120 degrees in the outback or -10 in the Arctic, Steve showed up dressed like he was about to mow a lawn in 1996. The man had one look and refused to evolve. It was less a fashion statement, more a lifestyle cult. At some point, even the animals probably thought, here comes that beige guy again. Khakis in crocodile pits? Sure. Khakis in snowstorms? Why not? Khakis at formal events? Probably. There's dedication, and then there's Steve, I only own one color palette, Irwin. Critics and fans alike turned his wardrobe into meme fodder, while Steve proudly doubled down. It wasn't just a uniform. It was an identity. A dusty, sweat-stained, slightly ridiculous identity. And honestly, we wouldn't want it any other way. Florida Man, Croc Edition. When Steve Irwin showed up at Florida's Eglin Air Force Base, you'd think he was there to defuse bombs or train with elite soldiers. Nope, just another day of freaking out over frogs and flipping over logs like a child on a sugar bender. Surrounded by actual US Army Rangers, Steve bounced around the base like a caffeinated meerkat, losing his mind over every scaly critter in sight. While the soldiers stood stoic in their camo, Irwin squealed with delight at every snake, toad, and turtle like it was Christmas morning in the swamp. Even hardened military men were caught smirking at his antics, probably wondering if they'd accidentally wandered into a National Geographic blooper reel. It was classic Steve. Turn a routine wildlife relocation into a full-blown reality show, complete with overreactions, unnecessary risks, and a whole lot of crikey. Somewhere, a general was probably asking if they could weaponize that enthusiasm. Verdict? Not lethal, but dangerously charming. Miami, meet the crikey curse. In 2019, the Miami Marlins Twitter account decided to go full chaotic neutral and posted a joke blaming the Tampa Bay Rays for Steve Irwin's death. Because apparently, nothing screams baseball rivalry like dragging a dead national treasure into it. The internet reaction was not great. Fans, Australians, and anyone with a working moral compass piled on instantly, and the Marlins had to issue a limp apology, like a kid caught shoplifting Crocodile Hunter DVDs. It was meant to be funny, they said, because clearly making jokes about fatal Stingray stabbings 13 years later is comedic gold. The Tampa Bay Rays, for their part, responded with silence, possibly because they were busy processing the fact that their logo had just been weaponized against Steve's legacy. It was a PR disaster that proved one thing. If you're a struggling baseball team with no World Series wins, maybe don't punch up at beloved conservation icons. Steve Irwin didn't deserve to be a meme from the dugout. Gatorgate, Unverified Edition. In 2025, the internet once again decided to play Let's Cancel the Dead Guy when a viral post on X, formerly Twitter, accused Steve Irwin of violently attacking an alligator. The post claimed Steve had allegedly gone full WWE on the poor reptile, only to later express regret. The problem? Absolutely zero credible evidence. No footage, no testimony. Just a sketchy thread, a suspicious username, and a comment section with more venom than a taipan. Fans were divided. Some defended Steve as a misunderstood hero. Others wondered if years of Croc wrangling finally crossed a line. Either way, the incident became a flashpoint in the never-ending battle of conservationist or chaos merchant. But unless someone digs up a lost episode of the Crocodile Hunter Gator Smackdown, we'll never really know. It's the modern age of rumor justice. Trial by repost, and if it trends, it must be true. Whether legit or lunacy, Gatorgate was one more barb in Steve's complicated, scaly legacy. Save the animals, but make it TV. Steve Irwin championed wildlife conservation, but did he do it by educating or electrifying? That's the million-dollar crikey. Question. While Steve raised millions for endangered species and established sanctuaries, critics argued his TV antics often leaned more towards circus act than science. Jumping on a croc? Entertaining. But is it good for the croc? Petting a cobra while screaming into the camera? High rating, sure, but low respect from ecologists who preferred clipboards over chaos. Some conservationists worried Steve's style sent the wrong message, that animals are here for adrenaline junkies with GoPros, not living creatures deserving peace. Others praised him for getting kids to care about wildlife in the first place. It's the great Irwin paradox. Was he a conservationist disguised as a performer, or a performer disguised as a conservationist? Either way, he turned snake wrangling into showbiz and left behind a legacy both powerful and polarizing. The animals might not have asked for it, but the Nielsen ratings sure did. Python for preschoolers. Your first pet. Maybe a goldfish, maybe a hamster. Steve Irwin's first pet, a 12-foot scrub python, at 6 years old, given to him by his father. Because clearly bedtime stories weren't terrifying enough. Most kids get a plush toy snake. Steve got one that could constrict his trachea mid-nap, and he loved it. He boasted about this gift like it was a badge of honor instead of a cautionary tale for child services. Animal lovers smiled, parents winced, and snake experts muttered something about not ideal. While other children were learning to read, Steve was learning which angle to dodge fangs from. It's the kind of upbringing that turns a boy into a wildlife icon, or an adrenaline junkie with a camera crew. Steve's childhood didn't just foreshadow his career, it wrangled it into existence. But handing a toddler a living rope of muscle and teeth? That's not parenting. That's foreshadowing a future documentary series with hazard pay. And there you have it! Love him or roast him, Steve Irwin made wildlife exciting, chaotic, and unforgettable, all while risking his limbs and occasionally his dignity. What do you think of Steve Irwin? Let me know down below. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.